Hey everyone, this is Caly. Thanks so much for joining me today as we reveal today's STAMPtember exclusive with Gina K Designs. I've got two cards to share, and they're both using the silhouette stamp set called Stay Cozy. Here is a quick look at that Stay Cozy stamp set. It's a 6x8 stamp set. Lots of silhouette images. There is one layering image for the moon, but there are lots of great sentiments as well. We've broken up the die sets into two sets, one for the sentiments and one for the images. Now you can get it all three together as a bundle, or you've got the stamp set and different die set options, and you also have the ability to buy the stamp set without any dies at all. Now for my first card, I really wanted to use the Master Layouts 14 and use it to pair with the postage grid stencil, which means I'm going to be doing some ink blending and masking. So I'm going to use my craft tacky mat here and lay it on my glass board surface. Then I'll take that postage die from the Master Layouts 14 set and I'll die cut this from white cardstock. Okay, so we have this pretty postage panel here, and I'm going to make my first card a landscape card. So I'm laying it on my craft tacky mat, and then I'm going to layer that stencil right over it so that it perfectly masks off each section of the postage grid. Because the surface of the craft tacky mat is tacky, it's going to hold that stencil and paper in place and make the stenciling of this background super easy. Before inking up the background, I knew that I wanted to mask off the moon because we wanted the moon to stay nice and bright. So I used the die for the moon and die cut a piece of masking paper and placed that masking paper where I wanted my moon to be positioned. Now I'm ready to ink blend the background. For the background on this card, I'm using two colors, Peacock Feathers and Uncharted Mariner. I first started with the lighter color and did a blend from top towards the center bottom, and then I'm going in with the darker color and just intensifying that night sky and making it a little darker towards the top and sides. And if I had planned this better, I would have started off doing this inside my Misty. The craft tacky mat is sized perfectly for the Misty, so I went ahead and lifted the whole thing up and put it inside my Misty so that I can stamp my images. And you'll want to note that I did remove the mask for the moon. So right now I'm laying out my silhouette stamps here to create a little scene in the background. Of course, the postage background is not necessary for this card. You can create a scene without postage lines and squares in the background, but I just thought that using this die really breaks up that background and gives it lots of interest, but you can still see that it's a scene. So I'll go ahead and stamp everything using a crisp black ink. I'm using Versaclear Nocturne ink. I just make sure that I press it really, really well where the stencil meets the paper so that I get a good impression before I lift off. Okay, for the moon, I am using a light gray. I'm actually going to stamp off because I don't want the moon to be this dark of a gray. So I've stamped off and then used that residual ink to stamp that first layer of the moon. It's very light so you can't see it. And then I'll stamp that second layer of the moon for the moon details using a full saturation of that flannel ink. So here we have a really pretty winter scene. I want to give it some more interest, so I'm going to splatter it with white paint. I have a small drop of white acrylic paint on here, and then I added a few drops of water, and I'm going to mix that up and just splatter my panel so that we kind of get a snowy scene. Then I can go ahead and lift off the stencil. That way we only get the ink and the splatters exactly where we want on that postage background. Now that this card panel is done, I'm going to set it aside and work on the second card. Then towards the end of the video, I'll do sentiments for both cards at the same time. So my second card also uses a master layout. This is from the Master Layouts 4. I just love the scallop edging. It just gives the card a bit of delicacy and some more interest. And as you can see, there is a stitch detail as well on the inside of that scallop frame. I'm going to use some Mask Magic strips from Gina K. These are 1/2-inch strips, and I'm placing them just a millimeter inside that stitching detail so that I can mask off the center of the card to build my scene. Because my card panel is masked off and adhered to my glass board, I decided to create some external stencils using some hillside and slopes dies. And so I took 2 scrap pieces of paper and die cut each of the hillsides onto the edges of the papers. That way I can use them as a stencil. For the very bottom layer here, I just did a mound, and I'm ink blending up so that we can see the shadow behind each layer of the hills that I'm creating. And I'm going darker as I go back because what you see in the front is often lighter. So on the second hillside here, I'm using some lighter ink as well as some darker ink to blend the two so that I can create this darker hillside layer. Now for the third hillside, I went ahead and reused that moon mask for the center of the card there towards the top. And this section is really the sky and the horizon. And I really want it to be a little bit more colorful, so I'm introducing some dried marigold in the orange, worn lipstick for the pink, and seedless preserves for the purple here. And then I also go in with the darkest blue, which is chipped sapphire, so that I can create a dusk look. All right, so I am introducing here some blue, but then I also go back to that second hillside and introduce that darker blue too because I wanted it to be a little bit more crisp of a blue. Now that I'm done ink blending my background, I can go ahead and once more remove that moon mask. And again, if I had planned this ahead of time, I should have really started in my Misty. That way I didn't have to peel up everything and transfer it over to the Misty. So it's in my stamp positioner now, and I'm ready to stamp my images. I'm doing a few images at a time so I can plan where I want things to go and get a real good balance for where these silhouette images are going to sit. I stamped the deer and that big tree first, and I decided not to do anything with the moon. It's just a bright moon. And so I put my stencil, made up stencil, back inside so that I can mask off that hillside to stamp some of these conifer trees in the background. And I decided to do 3, so that mask is really great as it sits there and masks off that hillside. And then I can stamp a few more at the bottom here to break up the white spaces on this card panel. And now that I'm happy with the stamped images, I'm going to go ahead and create some more splatters using the paint that I had left over from that first postage card panel that I created. I'm going to set this card panel aside because now we're ready for sentiments. I chose 2 sentiments from this stamp set, and I have to say I absolutely love the font on this stamp set. So much so that I went looking for this font, and I found the closest thing I could find to it. And so I'm going to start using it all the time because I love this font. Anyway, I stamped and embossed this in gold embossing powder, and I'm using the coordinating dies to die cut those sentiments. Now these sentiments are super delicate, so I'm using some 3D foam squares, but I'm cutting them down into fine strips so that I can add a little bit of dimension to these cards. Once the sentiments are attached to the card panels, they are ready to be attached to card bases. For this postage panel, I really wanted those postage lines to show through, so I used some 3D foam squares to prop that one up, and then I'll adhere the second one directly to a card base. So my 2 cards are complete using the Gina K's Stay Cozy STAMPtember exclusive for 2024. I hope you enjoyed these cards. I think these silhouette stamps are great for producing some really easy and can be colorful, peaceful, and tranquil winter cards. If you're interested in the products that I used today, be sure to check out the links below where everything will be linked for your convenience. Thanks so much for stopping by and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.